My mom got married when she was 17, and my dad was 7 years older, so he was 24, which they got married young in those days. They loved to dance, and they loved to roller skate. And I mention that because when they moved up to Aberdeen, where I was born, there was a roller skating rink up there, and they used to put on exhibitions. They could dance on their skates, which the people up there, all I knew was to go around in circles. I'd never seen anybody do anything like that. They lived their first part of their married life down in the Washington Broadway area. That was literally the suburbs, of Minneapolis in those days. And eventually, Dad and my grandpa built a home up on McNair and Thomas, which became the family home then for the rest of his siblings. And they literally lived their lives there until they either married, or three of them who never married lived there until they died. But Mom liked to take and move around. Dad was transferred out from the place where he worked, which was Reinhardt Brothers in Minneapolis, and they wanted to open up a branch in Aberdeen. So he and another employee were sent out there to take and establish the branch. And I remember that it was J Street that they lived on, and that's where I was born. Then they decided to take and close the branch down, and they then came back to the Minneapolis area. And I was just a little guy at the time, like maybe 5, 6 months old. And that's where my mom's dad passed away when I came back. So I'm trying to get chronologically how this worked. But he evidently saw me, but I don't remember him. I was too young. I do remember my mom and dad talking about Prohibition, and Dad used to make beer in the bathtub. And I guess it was pretty good stuff. But they, like I say, Mom got tired of houses or where we were living quite a bit, moving all the time. My first recollection of a house was on the hillside area off of Logan North, right off the school that was there. And from there they moved on up into about the 35th and Queen or Russell. And then from there they moved down, I remember the address, 3103 Logan Avenue North. And that's where they stayed for about, when we moved in there, I had to be about three years old. And they stayed there until I graduated from North High. And and I graduated when I was 17, so they lived there for about 14 years. That was the longest she ever stayed in one house. And that, of course, was the house we lived in when my two brothers went in the Navy during World War II. Dad had a chance to buy the house, and he didn't want it, so we paid rent there all those years. When I turned 17, the people who owned the house decided they really wanted to sell it, and put it up for sale. It was sold, and then we had to move. But that was right after the war, and there wasn't any rental housing around. So we ended up living with my brother Bob out on 38th and Noble in Robbinsdale for a while. And finally we found a place down on 24th and Penn, and we lived down there. And then my brother Bob had a house built for them That would have been up in the Crystal area,
Yeah.
and that's where they moved out there. During that time, of course, I had started my own business with my brother Bob, and but eventually she got tired of that place too, and and we found a house that was right across the street from my dad's sister, his oldest sister, Mary. And it was a lovely little spot. So we sold the house that they were in and bought that place for them. And that's where they lived until Dad ended up in a nursing home and passing away. Mother was to a point where she really needed to be put in, I shouldn't say put in, but she really needed to go into a nursing home too, which was St. Therese again. And she was there during the time that Bertie's mom and
Aunt Frances.
and Aunt Frances were there. So they were all three up there at the same time. My sister Eleanor was the dietitian there. And I was talking to Mark the other day, and he said he worked there.
Yeah, he did.
I guess several of the kids worked there. So that's the story of their lives. They moved a lot. They raised 8 kids. And like Bertie's family, Dad always had food on the table and a roof over our head. We were dirt poor. I remember being in school at Cleveland, and we always handed clothes down, and I couldn't wait to take and get my brother's clothes because they were always in better shape than mine. But I ended up with a pair of tennis shoes, and in those days they were KED Keds, and they were like today's high top tennis shoe that the basketball players wear. We were not rich enough to go out and buy new shoestrings when you broke. So when they got to a point where you couldn't tie knots in them anymore, you got rid of them and just put a string in them. And I got into trouble up at the school, and I was told to go out and stand in the hallway. And the principal came by and looked at me, and she said, "Why are you out here?" And I had to tell her, and she was a tough old nut. And she looked down at my shoes. She says, "Is that the best you can do?" And that's the first time I realized that my shoes were not very nice. I had a complex all of a sudden. But we had enough to keep us warm and food on the table, and Mom was a great cook. As my sisters turned out to be great cooks too. My sister Eleanor, like I said, was a dietitian at the nursing home. My sister Ruth left when she was about 17, and she had 10 kids. And I'm thinking my other sister, Mark, I had 2 younger sisters, but they're both great cooks too. And that's all because of Mom. In fact is we have here in our possession Mom's old cookbook.
Yeah, yeah.
And somebody, we have to take and give that to somebody who will appreciate it. She was a little overweight, but always kind. She was the kindest person. I remember when us kids would do something naughty, her idea of chastising us was make us go out and take a branch off the lilac bush and bring it to her. That was painful, just to do it. And that was enough. Very seldom she used it. But she was hardworking, I remember Mondays was wash day, and she did the washing for all 8 of us, and Dad, that's 9 people. herself was 10, but Monday was washing day. And during the summer months, my job was to go out and string the clothesline out in the backyard so we could take and hang all the clothes out there. In the wintertime, believe it or not, she hung all the clothes down in the basement. And to this day, I can't figure out how she got it all done, but she did. And besides that, then of course she cooked all the meals and until my older sisters were there to take and help out. So she worked certainly just as hard as my dad worked to take and raise the family. My dad, he was gentle when he had to be, but he was tough as nails otherwise.
I call it crotchety.
Crotchety now. I can't say he was rough on us, but you didn't cross him, which I did once, and I'll never forget it. But what I did wasn't very good either. He had borrowed a tent from a friend of his for my older brother Bob. Bob was 10 years older than I was, so I was, again, probably about 6 years old. And he put it up in the backyard. And my buddy and I, Don Millenberger, were in the tent, and it was hot in there. No, that was kind of dark. So we decided what that tent really needed was a window. So we cut a window in it. Yeah, that was early in mid-morning, and I had to wait all day long for my dad to show up that night because my mom wasn't going to chastise me for it. She's going to leave it up to Dad. And I caught heck for that one. So much so that my mom gave him hell for because he was too hard on me. But Dad, otherwise, like I say, he was gentle when he had to be or when he wanted to be. I never crossed him again. I just stayed clear of him. So I guess in a way I was kind of afraid of him all that time. I know my older brothers and sisters, he was always very gentle with them, but I think by the time I came around and then my two sisters, I think it was starting to wear on him a little bit. There was a lot of mouths to feed, and as we grew up and got to a point where we could work, we would all then contribute to the house.
Very much so.
Yeah, very much so. Bertie is. When I was working, I'd just bring my check home and sign it over and give it to Dad.
You had two jobs?
Yeah. And because I still had two younger sisters that he had to provide for. It was kind of interesting. The first job I had, I made more money than Dad made. He worked for Reinhardt Brothers all his life. Never made a whole lot of money, and as my older brothers and sisters, they did the same thing. They contributed as much as they could. I just chose to give them the check that I had for the daytime job, and there was so much work around at that time. It was the war years, and I was in the printing business, and I could get a job running a press any place. So I would work in the evenings for different places, printing for them, and I would keep that money then. So it worked out fine as far as I was concerned. Dad, I had figured out later that he was alcoholic. Didn't know in those days, what an alcoholic was, but Dad was alcoholic. I would drive back and forth with him to work, and I knew that he would get a beer and a bump for lunch, and on the way home he had to have another beer and a bump, and I couldn't handle something like that. I could drink maybe a half a glass of beer, and that was about it. So it was, it was later years. When I say later, by the time I was 20, 22 or so, talking to my sister Ruth, my oldest sister Ruth, I said, I really think Dad's an alcoholic. He says, you know he's an alcoholic, but he was never a mean alcoholic, He just, that's the way he was.
He was naturally mean, you mean?
Yeah. Well, back in those days, the hard-working guys, that's what they really did. They worked their buns off all week long, and on weekends they either made their own beer or they drank and sobered up and went back to work on Mondays, and it wasn't unusual. That was my dad. And he lived to the ripe old age of 83, which is, I'm turning 83 tomorrow, so I'm going to be outliving him. And his last several years, he actually had lost most of his sight. And that's why I'm today looking to preserve mine as best I can. But he passed away in a nursing home. And I hear he probably also had a little dementia.
We used to have good times with your family.
Yeah.
We used to play 31.
31 together, yeah.
All of us get together and play.
Well, as we got older, Dad no longer looked at us as his kids. We were grown adults, and he treated us that way, and we got along just fine. The fortunate thing was that when I started my business, and with my brother Bob, and eventually John was there too, we could provide them with additional income over and above what their Social Security was, which was very little because Dad never made a whole lot of money. So we kept Dad on the payroll. He didn't have to work or anything, but we put him on the payroll anyhow. And that gave them the extra money so that they could enjoy the remaining years of their lives. One of the neat things about having a business.
Yeah, you had all your relatives work for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, my mother even worked for
Yeah. I used to pick up her mom at the house, and on the way down, she said, "Why don't we just keep on driving?" Like,
Go west.
yeah, go west, go out to Seattle.